She left the Vampire King's child at an orphanage. He crossed England to find the heir he never knew. The mist lay thick over the countryside, curling around the ancient trees like whispers of long-forgotten secrets. In the quiet village of Elderwood, nestled among the fog and the distant hills, there was an orphanage. Its stone walls were gray and cold, yet the inside carried the warmth of countless lives that had passed through. Children laughed and cried, dreamed and feared, but one child among them held a story unlike any other, one the world had almost forgotten. A woman stood beyond the orchard gates, hidden by the shadows. Her eyes, dark and wide, scanned the grounds where her child played. Her heart ached with a longing she could not name. Years ago, fear had driven her to make the hardest decision of her life. She had carried her child from a land of shadows and kings, a kingdom ruled by a vampire whose power stretched across centuries. She had left the child in the care of strangers, hoping the boy or girl would live safely, far from the dangers of that cursed court. She had named the child Elian. Elian had grown into a quiet boy with sharp, thoughtful eyes, as though he carried memories not yet his own. He wandered the orphanage grounds with a careful curiosity, touching the trees, listening to the wind, and often staring toward the forest that loomed beyond the village. Sometimes in his dreams he heard whispers of a name he could not place, a voice that spoke to him in the dark hours of night. The woman, cloaked in gray, felt the tug of those dreams too. She could see it in him, the faint glimmer of something extraordinary, something that belonged neither entirely to this world nor entirely to the shadows she had fled. Her chest tightened. Every day she watched him from afar, fearing the moment he would understand who he was, and fearing the moment she might be seen by the one she had fled from, the Vampire King. His name was Dorian. Dorian ruled his kingdom with the precision of centuries. Yet even in his cold dominance, there had always been a part of him that yearned for what he had lost. A prophecy had haunted him. A child of his blood would hold both great power and great danger. He had never believed he would find that child until rumors began to reach him. Whispers of a boy with eyes that glimmered like the moon, living in a distant village among humans who did not know the night. Now, as the mist wrapped Elderwood in its silent embrace, Dorian traveled across the land. His presence went unnoticed by ordinary eyes. To them he was a man who walked the forests with strange grace, his shadow stretching longer than it should, his gaze piercing and cold. But to the woman watching, the thought of him coming closer was unbearable. She knew that even now, centuries of power could not erase the gentleness of a father longing for a child. Inside the orphanage, Elian sat beneath the wide boughs of an oak tree, his small hands tracing patterns in the dirt. He had always felt different, as though the world spoke to him in a language no one else understood. Other children played nearby, chasing one another, shrieking with laughter, but Elian remained apart. Something inside him pulsed quietly, a curiosity, a restlessness, a longing he could not name. "Elian!" called Sister Margot, the orphanage caretaker. "It's time to come in. Supper will not wait." Psh, 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 psh. Supper will not wait, and over times passed so far as bucket down. The woman turned away, her fingers clutching the fabric of her cloak. She had stayed too long already. The fear of Dorian's discovery pressed upon her chest, and yet a part of her longed to step forward, to see him, to tell him that Elian was safe, that he had grown strong and unbroken. But she could not. The memory of the night she had fled haunted her like a ghost. She had taken Elian as far from the castle as she could, across forests and rivers, and had left him here, hoping that love alone could protect him from the dark destiny that waited. Night fell, and the orphanage grew quiet. Lanterns flickered along the stone walls, casting long shadows that danced like spirits. Elian lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind as it hummed through the trees. He thought he saw a figure standing at the edge of the forest, dark and still, but when he blinked, it was gone. A sense of unease stirred in his chest, a whisper of something ancient and powerful that seemed to be calling his name. Faa! His horse's hooves struck the earth like muted drums, each step carrying him closer to the child he had never known. He remembered the night he had lost the woman, the night she had slipped away with his heir hidden in her arms. Anger and longing had mingled then, a mixture of fury and desire that had lasted centuries. And now the threads of fate had brought him near, drawn him by forces older than kingdoms or crowns. Dorian's eyes caught a faint light in the distance, a village glimmering in the fog. He felt it immediately, a pulse in the air, subtle yet undeniable, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. His pulse quickened. The scent of blood, of life, of something belonging to him filled the night. It had been so long, and yet he could feel it in his bones. The child was near. Back in the orphanage, the woman lingered at the edge of the orchard, watching Elian as he drifted into sleep. She whispered a prayer, asking the night to shield him, to hide him from the shadows that pursued. Her voice trembled, though no one could hear her. She remembered the castle walls, the cold halls, the dark eyes of Dorian as he had held her once and then let go of her by force. Could he be changed now, softened by time, or was he the same as the legend had said? Unyielding, relentless, a king of darkness who would not stop for anything. A sudden rustle in the trees startled her. Elian's small window framed the moonlight, and for a brief moment she saw a shadow moving in the distance, dark and deliberate. Her heart froze. The stories she had told herself for years, the stories of safety, of distance, crumbled. She realized that Dorian might be closer than she had ever imagined, and the years of hiding, of fearing, of running might be coming to an end. Elian stirred in his sleep. He muttered a name barely audible, a name that had haunted him in dreams. "Father?" The woman gasped, pressing a hand to her mouth. She had never dared to imagine that he would call that name aloud, that the bond she thought hidden could find its way through dreams and shadows. She felt a mixture of relief and fear, hope and dread. The night had shifted, and the world seemed smaller, tighter, full of currents she could not control. In the village, doors creaked as wind swept through the streets. Lanterns flickered, as if sensing the approaching presence of someone unnatural. Dorian dismounted from his horse at the edge of Elderwood. He moved silently, each step deliberate, his eyes scanning the houses, the forests, the paths where children might wander. There was a sense of inevitability in his movements, a quiet assertion that he had crossed kingdoms and centuries for this moment. Inside, Elian woke suddenly, feeling an urge he could not explain. He had the sense that tonight would change everything. Shadows seemed to stretch toward him, beckoning him, whispering of a father he had never known, of a power within him waiting to be claimed, of a destiny that would no longer be hidden. The woman, still hidden, pressed herself against the cold stone wall. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. She could not move, could not call out. She could only watch as the fog parted slightly, revealing a figure approaching, dark and elegant, with an aura that spoke of ancient strength and timeless sorrow. And then, as the figure stepped closer, Elian's eyes met his. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. The child looked into the eyes of the man who carried centuries in his gaze and something of himself in his soul. Recognition passed between them, not in words, but in the deep, quiet way that souls speak when bound by fate. The woman's knees shook, fear and relief warring within her. She wanted to run, to hide, to protect, yet part of her longed to step forward and embrace the impossible. But before she could act, Dorian's gaze shifted slightly, and his expression hardened. He sensed the woman too, the mother who had fled, the love he had never let go of entirely. The tension was a living thing, vibrating through the night, binding them all together in a web of longing, fear, and inevitability. Then the wind carried a whisper through the trees, a voice older than memory, warning of dangers yet unseen. Elian shivered, sensing that the world had changed, that his life would never be the same again. Dorian spoke, his voice low, commanding, yet tinged with something softer, almost human. "Elian, I've found you!" The boy froze, uncertainty and curiosity warring in his eyes. The woman gasped silently behind the wall, unsure whether to run or reveal herself. And in the distance, the fog thickened, carrying with it a promise and a warning that the shadows of the past were only beginning to stir. The night held them all in suspense, a quiet, tense pause before the storm of destiny broke. The child had been found. The king had returned. And the woman knew, with a chill in her bones, that nothing would ever be the same again. The shadows moved, the wind whispered, and the story was only beginning. The morning mist hung low over Elderwood, clinging to the cobblestones and the rooftops like a silken veil. Dorian stood at the edge of the village, tall and commanding, yet his eyes softened as they lingered on Elian. The boy's small hand gripped the wooden railing of the orphanage balcony, and for a moment, time seemed to still. Dorian wanted to reach for him, to explain, to erase the years of fear and separation, but he knew that trust could not be demanded. It had to be earned. The woman watched from the orchard, her heart a tumult of emotions. She had never seen Dorian in the daylight, and the sight of him now, his presence so powerful, yet tempered by a subtle sorrow, made her body tremble. She had fled centuries ago to protect her child, and now the father she had left behind was here, walking toward the life she had built in hiding. Dorian moved with the quiet grace of a predator, but his purpose was no longer to hunt. He had crossed forests and moors, rivers and ruins, guided by a force he could not name. It was as if the land itself had whispered his child's location to him, calling him forward. Every step he took brought memories he had buried to the surface, the nights in the castle when he had first heard the prophecy, the soft voice of the woman who had carried his child, and the cruel choice that had sent them both away from him. He approached the village with care. The villagers noticed him, yet none dared approach. Something about him commanded attention. Not fear exactly, but respect. There was a weight to his presence, an aura of history and power that made even the morning sun seem to pale in comparison. Dorian did not speak to them. His eyes were fixed on the orphanage. Inside the walls, Elian awoke to a strange restlessness. He could not explain it, but the air seemed heavier, charged with expectation. Something was coming. He could feel it in the way the wind rustled the leaves outside, in the faint scent of earth and smoke that drifted through the windows. He dressed quickly, stepping outside into the chill morning, drawn inexplicably toward the village edge where he had seen the shadow the night before. The woman followed him, unseen, a shadow among shadows. Fear and hope battled within her chest. She had never meant to be a coward, yet the thought of Dorian discovering Elian's presence without her guidance terrified her. And yet, watching her child move toward the unknown, toward the man who carried so much power and so much history, she could not look away. Dorian saw the boy before the boy saw him. There was a stillness in his movements, a quiet caution. He did not want to frighten Elian. The boy's safety was paramount, and he would not risk anger or haste. Yet as he stepped forward, the wind seemed to carry a whisper, and the connection between them grew stronger. Blood, lineage, and destiny intertwined in a subtle current that neither fully understood. Elian, Dorian called, his voice low and steady, carrying the authority of centuries. The sound of his name made the boy freeze. It was the first time he had ever heard it spoken aloud by anyone but himself. The boy turned slowly. Fear and curiosity danced across his features. Who are you?" he asked, his voice small but firm. Dorian crouched slightly to appear less imposing. "I am someone who has always watched over you," he said carefully. "Someone who has waited for you?" Elian's heart pounded. Something in the man's presence felt familiar, as if the stories in his dreams were coming to life. Yet he did not understand what they meant, and he could not trust fully. His small fists clenched at his sides, a mixture of bravery and apprehension. The woman stepped closer, keeping herself hidden behind a tree. Her eyes never left Dorian. She wanted to intervene, to explain, to shield her child from the confusion and the fear. But she also understood that this meeting was inevitable. She had run from it for years, yet now, here it was, standing before her in the soft light of dawn. "Elian," Dorian said again, softer this time, "I am your father." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. Elian's breath caught, The world seemed to tilt slightly, the wind carrying with it memories he could not name, feelings he could not place. He wanted to run, to hide, yet something inside him rooted him to the spot. "Father," he whispered, the word strange and unfamiliar on his tongue. "Yes," Dorian replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have come for you. For all these years I have searched, and now I have found you." The boy's eyes widened, a mixture of wonder and fear. He did not know whether to believe, whether to trust, and in that hesitation, the weight of Dorian's centuries of power pressed down, not threateningly, but as a reminder of the world he came from, a world Ian had never seen. The woman exhaled slowly, hiding behind the branches, feeling both relief and dread. She had always hoped this day would come, yet seeing it unfold was more terrifying than she had imagined. She knew Dorian could protect Alien, but she also knew the shadows he carried could touch them both in ways she could not predict. Dorian extended a hand, not demanding but offering. "Come with me," he said. "I will answer your questions. I will keep you safe, but you must trust me." Alien hesitated. His small hands twitched. The pull of destiny, the whispers of his dreams urged him forward, yet the fear of the unknown held him back. Finally, slowly, he stepped closer, placing a tentative hand in Dorian's. The connection was immediate. Alien felt a surge of warmth, of something ancient and powerful coursing through him. Memories that were not yet his own flickered in his mind, snippets of moonlit nights, distant voices, a sense of longing that stretched beyond the years. The woman could not contain a quiet sigh. Her child was safe, for the moment, but she knew that this was only the beginning. Dorian and Alien moved through the village, unnoticed by the few early risers. Every step seemed to carry weight, as though the earth itself acknowledged the importance of this journey. Dorian spoke sparingly, answering Alien's hesitant questions in measured tones, careful not to overwhelm him. Where are we going?" the boy asked, his curiosity brimming despite his fear. "To a place where you will understand," Dorian replied. "Where you will learn who you are and what you are capable of." Elian's eyes widened. The words carried a promise and a warning, an invitation and a challenge. He did not know what lay ahead, but he sensed that the journey would change him forever. The woman followed at a distance, her thoughts heavy. She had hidden Alien from Dorian for so long, yet she could see that the boy's fate was entwined with his father's. She feared the shadows that lingered in Dorian's past, the enemies, the curses, the dangers that had shaped him, but she also knew that together they might be able to protect Alien from the darkness that threatened him. As they traveled, the landscape shifted. Forests grew darker, older, the trees towering and twisted. The wind carried strange scents, earthy and metallic, as though the land itself remembered centuries of magic and blood. Dorian's steps never faltered, though his eyes were constantly alert, scanning the shadows for signs of danger. A lion stayed close, holding onto the hand that had suddenly become familiar and comforting. At one point, a ruined chapel appeared through the trees, its walls crumbled but still majestic. Dorian paused, allowing Elian to explore cautiously. The boy touched the cold stone, feeling an energy that hummed beneath his fingers. He turned to Dorian, eyes wide with wonder.
"This place, it feels strange," Elian whispered.
"It is," Dorian replied. "It carries history, magic, and memories older than the kingdoms you know. One day, you will understand its power." They moved on, the journey stretching through valleys and over hills. Dorian rarely spoke of his kingdom, of the centuries he had lived, or the power he possessed. Instead, he focused on the boy, guiding him carefully, allowing Elian to learn and grow without fear. Yet beneath the calm there was an undercurrent of urgency, an invisible thread pulling them toward a destiny that could not be avoided. Night fell once more, and they made camp beneath a circle of ancient oaks. Elian sat by the fire, staring into the flames, feeling a mixture of awe and unease. Dorian watched him silently, his expression unreadable. Will you really protect me?" Ellen asked, his voice small. Dorian knelt beside him, placing a hand gently on his shoulder. "I will protect you," he said, his voice steady. "No matter what comes, I will not let anything harm you." The boy nodded, a flicker of trust in his eyes, though he could not yet fully comprehend the world he had been born into. The shadows of the past stretched around them long and dark, yet within the circle of firelight a fragile bond began to form, a bond of father and child, of destiny and choice, of courage and love. But the night was not without danger. From the edge of the forest faint whispers drifted on the wind, voices that promised both temptation and peril. Dorian's eyes narrowed, sensing the approach of something old and powerful, a shadow that had waited centuries to test him. Elian shivered, unaware of the threat, but feeling a sudden chill in the air. Dorian rose, placing himself between the boy and the darkness. "Rest," he said firmly. "Tomorrow we continue. But tonight the shadows watch, and I will not let them touch you." Elian drifted into an uneasy sleep, the firelight casting flickering patterns across his face. Dorian remained awake, alert, watching the forest. The years of searching, the centuries of longing had led him here. And yet, he knew this was only the beginning. The journey to reclaim the child, to protect him, and to face the dangers of the world was far from over. In the darkness beyond the fire, eyes glimmered, hidden among the twisted roots and ancient trees. Something stirred, something patient, cunning, and relentless. The Vampire King may have found his heir, but the world had other plans. Forces older than kingdoms and older than time itself would not allow the path to be simple, and the trials of blood and shadow were only beginning. The night stretched on, heavy with anticipation. Dorian kept watch, silent and unyielding. Elian slept, dreaming of shadows and whispers. And somewhere in the depths of the forest, destiny waited, patient and inevitable, ready to shape the lives of the child, the woman, and the king, in ways they could not yet imagine. The journey had begun, and nothing would ever be the same again. The sun had barely risen above the horizon when Dorian and Elan emerged from the forest, the mist curling around their feet like restless spirits. The boy's senses were alive in ways he could not fully understand. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call, every whisper of wind seemed sharper, more vivid. Dorian watched him carefully, noting the subtle reactions, the way Elian's eyes followed the movement of shadows, the tension in his small shoulders, the curious tilt of his head when something invisible brushed against his mind. "You feel it, don't you?" Dorian asked, his voice low, almost a murmur. "The world speaks to you in ways ordinary people cannot hear." Elian looked up at him, eyes wide. I think I do," he admitted. "Sometimes I hear voices, like they're calling me, or maybe it's just dreams." Dorian shook his head slowly, a shadow of a smile on his lips. "Dreams, yes, but also something more." "Your blood carries power, Elian, the power of our line. A gift that must be understood, respected, and, above all, controlled." The boy swallowed hard, unsure if he was frightened or exhilarated. His life until now had been simple, limited by the walls of the orphanage and the expectations of humans. But now, with Dorian, a man whose presence was both comforting and terrifying, the horizon of his world had stretched wide into unknown lands of possibility and danger. They reached the ruins of an ancient cathedral, its stone walls scarred by time, sunlight streaming through fractured stained glass. The building felt alive, carrying the weight of centuries, the echoes of prayers long forgotten, and the faint hum of magic woven into the stone. Elian stepped carefully across the cracked floors, feeling a resonance beneath his feet. "What is this place?" he asked, curiosity overtaking his fear. "This is a place of power," Dorian said. "A place where many before you learned to understand themselves. Here, you can begin to see who you truly are." The boy's gaze drifted upward, to the broken archways that framed the sky. The wind carried with it a chill that raised goosebumps on his arms. He felt a presence, faint and pulsing, like a heartbeat in the stone. Dorian noticed it too, a whisper of a curse, a shadow lingering from a time long past. "You sense it, don't you?" Dorian asked, crouching beside him. The shadow that waits for us. It has been here for centuries, tied to the bloodline. You must learn to face it. Elian nodded, though his small hands trembled slightly. I want to be brave, he said. I want to know who I am. Dorian placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but gentle. Bravery is not the absence of fear, he said. It is standing and facing it anyway. The woman watched from the edge of the ruins, her heart heavy with emotion. She had followed them cautiously, keeping hidden, fearing Dorian's reaction if he saw her. Yet seeing Elian here, standing beside his father, she felt a mix of pride and sorrow. She had given him to the world to protect him, and now, in the presence of his true heritage, she realized that protection came with a price. The shadows of the past were awakening, and the world would demand more from them all than she had ever imagined. As they moved deeper into the cathedral, the air grew colder, and a faint mist began to rise from the cracked stone floors. Elian felt the pull, a subtle tug at the edges of his consciousness. The whispers grew louder, voices that seemed to echo in his mind, urging him to follow, to uncover secrets hidden for generations. Suddenly the shadows shifted, forming shapes that seemed alive. Dark figures flickered at the corners of their vision, vanishing when Elian tried to focus. Dorian's eyes narrowed. The curse is aware of you now, he said quietly. It has waited for your awakening, and it will not let us proceed without testing you. Elian's heart raced. Test me?
How?
He asked, fear and anticipation mixing in his voice. Dorian knelt, placing both hands on Elian's shoulders. You will feel it. The shadow will try to tempt, to frighten, to overwhelm you. But you are stronger than it knows. Remember this. You are not alone. I am here. And you carry the blood of our line. That gives you strength. The boy swallowed, closing his eyes. The mist thickened around them, and the whispers became more insistent, more urgent. Elian felt the pull of the shadow, a cold hand brushing against his heart. Fear threatened to consume him, but he remembered Dorian's words, the touch of his father's hand grounding him, and the presence of the woman watching and hoping from afar. A sudden flash of light pierced the cathedral, and Elian stumbled backward, feeling energy surge through him. The shadows recoiled, hissing and writhing as if stung by invisible fire. Elian opened his eyes, and for the first time he understood. He could control this power, at least in part. His heart pounded, but a new confidence stirred within him, a knowledge that he was not merely a child of fate, but a participant in it. Dorian stepped closer, his voice calm and commanding. Good. You felt it. That is your first step. The shadow tests those who would claim their birthright. It will try again, but each time you will grow stronger. Elian's eyes met Dorian's. For the first time he saw not just power but care, an intent to guide, to protect, and to teach. The boy felt a spark of trust, fragile yet real, forming in his heart. The woman finally stepped into the open, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She approached cautiously, hands raised in peace. Dorian, she said softly. I am still here. I never left completely. Dorian turned, his gaze softening yet layered with centuries of pain and longing.
I know,
he replied, his voice low. I have known, and I forgive you. The woman's lips trembled, a mixture of relief and sorrow. I feared you would take him and the world he knew from him. Dorian's expression was unreadable, but there was a quiet strength in his eyes. He is mine, yes, but he is also yours, he said, and I will not take him from you. We will guide him together. Elian felt a rush of emotions, too complex for words. Relief, wonder, awe, and a strange tentative happiness. He had two people who loved him, yet he sensed the tension between them, the weight of past decisions, regrets, and sacrifices. He realized that this reunion was not simple. Love, trust, and power intertwined in ways he did not yet understand, but he knew he wanted to learn. The mist in the cathedral swirled again, darker this time, carrying with it a sense of threat. Dorian's eyes narrowed, and he placed himself between Elian and the shadows. "The curse knows you are here. It will not be easy. But we face it together." Suddenly a chilling voice echoed through the ruined walls, low and hollow. "So, the heir has awakened," it hissed. The shadows writhed, forming shapes that were both frightening and mesmerizing, as if alive with ancient malice. Elian's small hands clenched into fists, his body trembling. The shadows advanced, reaching out like dark fingers. Yet he did not run. He remembered Dorian's words, the warmth of his hand, the presence of the woman who had watched over him for so long. He took a deep breath and stepped forward, letting the power within him flow, feeling the energy of his bloodline ignite. A surge of light burst from Elian, pushing back the shadows, illuminating the cathedral in an otherworldly glow. The dark shape shrieked and dissipated, retreating to the corners of the ruin. Elian stood, breathing heavily, awe and fear mingling in his chest. Dorian knelt beside him, pride and relief in his gaze. "You have done well," he said. "This is only the beginning, but you have faced your first trial. You are stronger than you knew." Elian looked up at the ruined cathedral walls, feeling a new sense of purpose. I can do this," he asked. "Yes," Dorian said firmly. "And you will. But you must remember, power brings responsibility. The shadow will return, and it will test you again. You must be ready." The woman approached, her eyes soft with admiration and concern. She placed a gentle hand on Elian's shoulder. "You are brave," she said. "Braver than I ever imagined. But be careful. There are dangers that even he cannot protect you from." Elian nodded, understanding the weight of her words. The world he had known was gone, replaced by one of shadows, power and destiny. And yet, he did not feel fear now, only determination. Dorian stood, his gaze scanning the ruins, alert for any sign of returning threats. "We rest here tonight," he said. "But at dawn, we continue. There is more for you to learn, and the shadows are patient. They will not leave us alone for long." The woman watched the father and son, a fragile hope blooming in her heart. The years of fear, running and hiding had brought them to this moment, and though the path ahead was uncertain, she knew that together they could face whatever the shadows and the world would bring. Night fell over the cathedral, and the firelight flickered across the ancient stones. Elian lay beside the warmth, feeling the power within him pulse in quiet rhythm. Dorian kept watch, eyes scanning the darkness, ready for whatever came. And in the shadows beyond, whispers stirred once more, patient and deliberate, as though the world itself awaited the next trial of the heir. The reunion had begun, the first tests were passed, and the bond of family, broken by fear, time, and secrets, was slowly being reforged. But the shadows of the past were far from defeated, and the true challenge had yet to come. Storm clouds gathered over the ruined castle atop the cliff, dark and heavy, the wind whipping across the jagged rocks below. Lightning flashed, illuminating the ancient stone walls, twisted battlements, and long-forgotten towers. Dorian, Elian, and the woman, whose name was Seraphine, stood together on the highest terrace, the roar of the sea below echoing their own beating hearts. Elian's hand shook, not from fear alone, but from the surge of energy coursing through him. The shadow they had first felt in the cathedral was stronger here, amplified by centuries of magic, by curses cast and never broken, by the lingering bitterness of old power. It slithered along the stone floors like a living thing, whispering in voices meant to confuse and frighten. "You must be ready," Dorian said, his voice steady and commanding, though his own eyes betrayed a flicker of worry. "This is the final test." The shadow will seek to twist your fears, your doubts, your anger. But you are not alone. You are mine, and Seraphine is here. Trust in us, trust in yourself. Elian nodded, though his chest felt heavy. He had faced shadows before, yes, but never like this. Never a darkness that carried both intelligence and malice, that could reach into his thoughts and tempt him with visions of power and freedom beyond control. The wind roared through the castle ruins, and with it came whispers of long-lost secrets, of promises broken, of pain that had lasted centuries. Seraphine stepped forward, placing a hand on Elian's shoulder. "Remember," she said softly, "you are stronger than this shadow thinks. You are brave, you are loved, and you carry the strength of both your father and me. That is more than enough." Elian drew a deep breath, feeling the pulse of magic beneath his skin. His blood hummed with the power inherited from Dorian, mingled with the courage and care that Seraphine had nurtured in him all these years. He closed his eyes, reaching within, letting the energy flow, learning again that power and love could coexist. The shadow advanced. It shaped itself into figures from his dreams. Monstrous shapes, tall and dark, twisting into forms that whispered threats and promises. They reached for him, fingers like smoke, eyes glowing with malice. "You do not belong here," the voices hissed. "You are weak. You cannot control what is yours." Elian's heart raced, but he stood firm. "I belong here," he whispered, louder this time, feeling the warmth of Dorian's hand on his back, the gentle pressure of Seraphine beside him. "I am not afraid." The shadow recoiled slightly at the word, as though hearing truth for the first time. Elian focused, drawing from the energy of the castle, the storm, the cliffs, the centuries of his bloodline. The power rose inside him, bright and steady, illuminating the ruin in flashes of golden light that pushed back the darkness. Dorian stepped closer, his presence a shield, guiding the boy without touching him. "Feel it," he said. "You are stronger than you know. Your fear is not weakness, it is proof that you care, that you are human. Now command the shadow, Elian. Command it with your heart and your mind." Elian's eyes opened, glowing faintly in the dim stormlight. "I am not afraid of you," he said, his voice gaining strength. "You cannot control me!" The shadow screeched, the sound echoing through the castle, and for a moment it seemed to twist and retreat. Yet it was patient, intelligent, relentless, circling like a predator waiting for the boy to falter. Elian's knees wobbled, his energy flickering, but Dorian and Seraphine were there, anchors of strength. Suddenly the storm intensified, lightning striking the walls around them. The shadows shrieked, fragmented, and from their midst emerged a single, monstrous form, taller than Dorian, darker than the night, eyes blazing with centuries of hatred. It was the curse itself, given shape, the culmination of all the darkness tied to the king's bloodline. Elian stepped forward, voice steady. "I am Elian. I am the heir, and I will not be controlled." The curse lunged, but Dorian was ready. He moved faster than the eye could follow, intercepting the attack, his strength and speed a testament to centuries of mastery. He did not strike to kill, he struck to protect, to shield Elian from harm, every movement precise, a dance of power and care. Seraphine called out, her voice carrying across the storm. "Elian, your heart. Focus on what is true. The shadow cannot touch love, or courage, or hope." Olivan closed his eyes, drawing deep within himself, summoning the power of his bloodline, the lessons of Dorian, and the nurturing strength of Seraphine. Light burst from him, golden and fierce, pushing the shadow backward. It hissed, twisted, faltered, but it did not vanish entirely. "You are strong," it whispered, venom in its voice. "But strength alone will not save you." Elian's eyes glimmered with determination. "No, it will not. But love and courage will. And I have both." He reached out, and the golden light surged outward, meeting the shadow with an unstoppable force. The curse shrieked, disintegrating into fragments that scattered into the wind. The storm seemed to echo the victory, thunder rolling across the cliffs as if the heavens themselves were acknowledging the triumph. For a moment, silence fell. The wind slowed, the clouds parted slightly, and the first rays of sunlight broke through, illuminating the ruins in soft, golden light. A lion stood, breathing heavily, yet steady. The shadow was gone for now. Dorian stepped forward, placing a hand on Elian's shoulder. Pride and relief filled his eyes. "You have done it!" he said, his voice low and filled with emotion. "You faced the curse, the shadow of our bloodline, and you did not falter. I am proud of you, Elian. You are truly the heir." Elian looked up at his father, awe and love mingling in his eyes. I couldn't have done it alone," he said softly. Dorian smiled, rare and genuine, a light breaking through centuries of shadow. "You never had to," he said. "I will always be here." "And Seraphine? She has guided you with her love. Together we are stronger." Seraphine stepped forward, placing a hand on Elian's other shoulder. "You have grown into someone remarkable," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "We all have our roles in this world, Elian. And now, you are ready to step into yours." The boy felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of belonging he had never known before. For the first time in his life, he did not feel alone. The shadows of the past, the fear of the unknown, and the weight of destiny were still there, but he knew he had the strength, the guidance, and the love to face whatever came next. Dorian turned to Seraphine, a quiet intensity in his gaze. "I have wronged you," he said, voice heavy with centuries of regret. "I let fear and pride separate us when we should have stood together. I cannot change the past, but I promise from this moment we face the future as one." Seraphine nodded, tears in her eyes. "Yes," she said, "we face it together. No more running, no more hiding. We are a family, finally." Elian looked between them, a sense of peace settling over him for the first time. "We are," he said, and he meant it with all his heart. The storm began to ease, the first warmth of dawn breaking through the clouds. The sea below was calmer, reflecting the golden light, and for a moment the world seemed to pause. The curse was gone, the shadow defeated, and yet a quiet reminder lingered. Life would always carry challenges, trials, and darkness. But Elian had learned that strength was not in avoiding shadows. It was in facing them with courage and love. Dorian placed a hand on Elian's head, ruffling his hair slightly, a rare, intimate gesture from a man who had ruled kingdoms for centuries. "You have a destiny to shape, Elian," he said. "But remember, no destiny is fulfilled alone. You carry our blood, yes, but also our hearts. That is your true power." Elian smiled, a mixture of pride and relief. "I understand," he said. "And I will not forget." Seraphine stepped closer, her hand intertwined with Dorian's for the first time in years. "This is the beginning," she said. "The beginning of a new life, a new family, and a new path. Together, we will face it all." Elian looked out over the cliffs, feeling the wind in his hair, the power in his veins, and the love surrounding him. He understood now that the journey had not just been about discovering his bloodline, or his abilities, or even the shadow he had faced. It had been about finding his place in a world that had always seemed larger than he could comprehend, about learning that courage, love, and trust could conquer even the deepest darkness. And in that moment, as the sun rose fully over the horizon, the ruins of the castle bathed in golden light. Elian knew one thing with certainty: the shadows of the past might linger, but they would never define him. He was ready for the future. He was ready for his destiny. He was ready to live as the heir, the son, the boy who had survived and grown stronger. The world stretched before them, full of promise and danger, beauty and shadow. And together, Dorian, Elian, and Seraphine stepped forward, bound by blood, by love, and by the unbreakable ties of family. The curse was defeated. The heir had awakened. And the journey of life, with all its challenges, had only just begun.